Funding for Escape from Affluenza was provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the Summit Charitable Foundation, the Merck Family Fund, and the Pew Charitable Trusts.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special news bulletin.
This is Roberto Di Nero with a shocking development to report. Those are the Joneses, the American family we've all been trying to keep up with for years. But as you can see by the white flag, they are surrendering.
We've had it. We're exhausted. We never see each other anymore. And we have so much debt, it's just not worth it. So please, stop trying to keep up with us.
So what's next?
We're just going to try living better on less.
And there you have it, the Joneses surrender.
I'm Wanda Urbanska. About 10 years ago, my husband, Frank Levering, and I decided to call a halt to keeping up with the Joneses. The cost was too high. The long hours we had to work to pay for it all meant we hardly ever saw each other. We were successful writers, but we weren't happy. At the suggestion of Frank's elderly parents, we moved here to the Blue Ridge Mountains to take over the orchard that had been in their family for generations. It was a big gamble because the orchard was deep in debt. Making it profitable again meant we had to learn frugality in a hurry. It wasn't always easy, but we found living simply to be full of rewards. Time was the biggest. Time for family, friends, community affairs, and good conversation. Farm work is hard but seasonal. We still had time to write, and we wrote a book called Simple Living about our experiences. The response we got told us we weren't alone. In the 10 years since Frank and I left the fast lane for a simpler life, we met many other people who are finding ways to live better on less. You'll meet some of them too a little later in this program. But first, some history.
4 out of 5 experts say millions of Americans have fallen victim to a debilitating disease called affluenza. Symptoms include swollen expectations, shopping fever, chronic stress, fractured families, festering social scars, and resource exhaustion. Affluenza is a painful addiction to the relentless pursuit of more, and if not treated, can lead to perpetual discontent. Experts believe affluenza will become a household word as the epidemic continues to spread.
Surveys show that most Americans, regardless of income, think they'd find happiness if they only had twice as much money as they do now. But they also show we're no happier now than we were 40 years ago, when we only had half as much or less.
People feel sad, and what do? They go to the mall and they shop. And they buy a boombox, and it makes them feel better, but it only makes them feel better for about a week. And after that, they're still sad, and they have the boombox sitting on the shelf or something.
Stop, 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 stop.
Hard Rock Cafe, Las Vegas. You were in Las Vegas?
Right. And I bought a T-shirt, and as you can see, I didn't even take it out of the bag.
People usually lose their shirts in Las Vegas, Mr.
At a public forum in Chicago, 40 people have been brought together by an organization called the Center for a New American Dream to discuss their buying habits. They were randomly chosen by a polling firm to represent the region's diversity. All were asked to bring one item they'd purchased but didn't really need.
This is the incredible food dehydrator, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's quite a little item.
Well, tell us how you happened to acquire it.
It was on TV. Credit card 800 number and UPS, and I'm in business.
Well, no, they're in business.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. And that was it. And the thing was, I think I spent more time cleaning it than I actually did using it.
So you didn't get up of a given morning and say, you know, honey, we really need a dehydrator.
No, but I do this all the time. My wife and I do it. We have, our whole kitchen's filled with things.
Sounds like we could have your whole kitchen on the table here.
In my garage, too, I've got everything. You know, everything, yeah. Yeah, we just buy everything we can.
Soon, most of these products are likely to end up in a landfill.
When I first started working here, I was really amazed at the amount of material that people threw away. A lot of things I thought could be salvaged and reused. You get carpeting, sofas, chairs, tables, and over here's a lawnmower, a computer monitor, kitchen sinks, and whatever.
This in a city, Seattle, with one of the highest rates of recycling in America. Even here, the piles of stuff simply thrown away keep growing.
Recycling has been a real success we're proud of, but it's partial. We don't want to lean that far on it because really the big success story would be preventing the waste in the first place.
Just how much does a typical middle-class American consume? In 1990, Sid Quarrier tried to figure that out by adding up everything his family had used in the previous 20 years.
You used to eat M&Ms almost every day. Did you figure that in?
3 bags of M&Ms per week is 3,000 bags of M&Ms. 2 pounds of beef a week, that's 4,000 pounds.
Quarrier shared his calculations with Alan Williams, a colleague at the Connecticut Department of Environmental Protection.
6 radios, 1 VCR, 3 alarm clocks, 2 stereo systems, 700 batteries, 3.5 tons of newspaper, 10,000 gallons of heating oil, 3 televisions. It just goes on and on.
As they examined the resources required by Sid's middle-class lifestyle, he and Alan were astonished.
And what frightened me is that both Sid and I consider ourselves environmentalists, and that if we were using these resources, what about the rest of the world? What about the rest of America?
Some scientists up in Canada recently figured out that to support all the world's people at the North American level of consumption, we'd need 4 planets. In other words, we're 3 planets short.
In the name of convenience, we've gone from designing products so they could be repaired to a reliance on throwaways.
25 years ago, the large bulk of footwear was resolvable or repairable. Everybody had their footwear repaired. It was automatic. And now things just don't get repaired anymore. The little corner shoe repair shop, the 1- and 2-man shops that everybody used to go to, they're virtually disappearing. People just have gotten used to throwing footwear away.
And a lot of other things. Despite recycling, the average American throws away a ton of solid waste each year. And for every ton that ends up in the landfill, another 20 tons were originally used up to produce it.
Everything that we buy or use in our daily life has an ecological wake that ripples out across the ecosystems of the planet. I start my day with a cup of coffee. That coffee started as 100 beans growing on a tree in Colombia, in an area that was once cloaked with cloud forests, a kind of tropical forest that's now among the most endangered types of tropical ecosystems. The beans were picked by a worker who made about $1 a day. They were shipped on a freighter made of steel from Japan, out of iron from Australia, fueled with diesel from Venezuela. Then the beans were unloaded in New Orleans, where they were roasted over flames of natural gas piped in from Oklahoma. The beans were then loaded in a 4-ply bag of 3 types of plastic resin and aluminum foil from the Columbia River system in Washington State. They were shipped across the country on an 18-wheeler, brought home from a grocery store in a brown paper bag made of Douglas fir trees from Western Oregon. They were ground in my kitchen in a grinder made in Taiwan with parts from 6 other countries. Then they were brewed in a coffee maker that was made originally in Germany out of parts from a bunch of other countries. The water came from the slopes of the Cascade Mountains, and the electricity came from a dam on the Columbia River. Then I enjoyed my cup of coffee.
Over the past 10 years, Frank and I have thought a lot about how much we use. We try to live by the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, and recycle. I still wonder sometimes, though, how much we consume. I haven't tried to add it all up, though, like Sid Quarrier did. Maybe it's because I'm afraid I'd be as shocked as he was. But for Gene and Dick Roy, the numbers would look very different.
At some point, things do have to level off if we're to live on a sustainable basis.
Hi, Kathy, this is Dick.
The office Dick Roy works in isn't nearly as spacious as his old one, and his salary doesn't come close to what he once earned. In fact, he's now paid nothing at all. Dick is the founder and director of the Northwest Earth Institute in Portland, Oregon.
Our goal was to be a resource for people and allow them to adopt habits and values that would be more earth-friendly and more sustainable.
Dick Roy has always been a leader, officer in the Navy, top of the class in law school, and then top of the city, a corporate attorney whose office looked out on all of Portland. He could have lived in luxury, but the woman he married wouldn't have it that way.
I didn't want to live in a way that would harm the earth.
Gene started with kind of a lifestyle oriented toward frugality and simplicity, and then I came at kind of philosophically, you might say.
So despite their substantial income, the Roys lived simply, dressing their children in secondhand clothes, going camping and backpacking on their vacations, using a clothesline instead of a dryer. Their neighbors thought them a little strange, but
A lot of our friends have taken on our values. I've noticed that through the years. I did feel different at times. You know, my friends would tease me. They would tease me about having an old used bicycle, but I just had to accept that. And
what Jean wouldn't accept were the long hours that corporate attorneys usually put in. She insisted that Dick be home for dinner and make time for his family.
As a lawyer, I always had some of the lowest billable hours in our firm, and so by choice, I simply worked lower hours. And what I found in the firm was that if you practiced law very well and your relationships were good, that the hours were not essential.
Eventually, though, Dick Roy grew tired of corporate law. His children were grown, and he wanted to do something that more directly expressed his values, especially his concern for the environment. So, at the age of 53, Dick Roy left his career for his calling.
As each of us do some little bit each day, the collective impact of that can be immense.
Volunteers from the Northwest Earth Institute conduct seminars on simple living in many of Portland's largest corporations. Already, thousands of people have taken their courses.
We simply give people a chance to stop, take the time to consider their values and habits and how those are affecting the earth.
first, you have to decide to do it and be willing to spend a little extra time at first. If you get into habits where you always have your bag, you can save 500 packages a year.
Jean Roy is also an active volunteer. A leader in Portland's recycling program, she often teaches other people how to reduce resource and energy use in their homes.
One of the changes that we've made over the years is getting to a point where we create almost no waste.
The Roys compost food waste using a worm bin. They carefully reuse paper and discourage junk mail by sending it back.
So that's going to go back too, along with this.
Yeah, make sure you get everything in it that they sent to us.
Okay.
And they'll pay the postage.
Amazingly, the Roys fill only a single garbage can with trash in an entire year. In their efforts to live sustainably, Dick and Jean Roy may represent the extreme, but they insist they aren't sacrificing anything.
If you ask people what kinds of activities bring them pleasure, it's usually contact with nature, things that are creative, and relationships with people. And so, you know, the things that we do to live simply bring us all those satisfactions.
I've met people like the Roys throughout the United States, but in one city more than most, the frugal lifestyle is winning widespread respect. Talk about the economy in this booming city, and you're bound to come around to Microsoft, the local software giant. In the past 15 years, hundreds of Microsoft employees have become millionaires. Ron Simons might have become one too, but his life took a different turn.
I'm trying to watch my weight, and I'm watching it go up. I know, and this is why you need to eat these. Put your mouth around some of these right here.
Ron is a regular volunteer at Seattle's Bailey Boucher House, a home for people with AIDS.
How's life in the fast lane?
Not long ago, Ron had no time to volunteer for anything. He was a manager at Microsoft, a company where long working hours are almost a religion.
Well, I come in sometimes on Wednesdays as well as my Tuesdays just to say hello. It was not uncommon to work 11 or 12 hours, 5 days a week, and then come in 5 or 6 hours, you know, on a weekend. per day. So my life pretty much was Microsoft.
Financially, it was a very good life for a young man from inner city Detroit who was the first in his family to earn a college degree.
I went to Columbia, and to get to Columbia from the airport, you have to drive through Harlem. And you realize, my God, my people are, the drama that they're going through and the pain and the suffering that's going on. And then you arrive at this Ivy League campus with ivy growing up the sides of the walls. And you could get a lot of them thinking, well, this is what, life is all about. It's like being at this really prestigious institution and learning all these great things about business. But it's not.
As he climbed the corporate ladder, Simons grew tired of endless conversations about making money.
For a long time, I was thinking, there's something missing in my life.
He often thought about his grandparents in Detroit.
My grandmother in particular was one of the most philanthropic women that I had known in my life. I mean, not only did she, give money to her church, but she volunteered and helped people through organizations that she got involved in, but also individually. My grandfather was all that in a bag of chips. He would give you the shirt off his back. And so that whole model was what I was used to.
And Ron had another dream. He'd always wanted to be an actor, but it took courage to leave the security of his career.
It was hard. I mean, it was sleepless nights and
Finally, offered yet another promotion, Simons resigned from the company instead. The first reaction he faced was fury.
My mother thought I was crazy when I told her that I was leaving Microsoft to become an actor. She said, "You are doing what? Lord have mercy, Jesus."
Ron Simons has become an actor. It isn't easy. He's just beginning to do meaningful roles instead of commercials.
I like baseball.
But he's patient. He lives frugally, and he finds enormous satisfaction in the volunteer work he now has time for.
I really had that opportunity to fulfill that dream, to really give back, and man, I went out there. I mean, I just got involved in stuff. All right, nice save.
Besides volunteering at the Home for AIDS patients, he reads to the blind, uses his business skills to help nonprofit organizations, and serves on several local boards. But he especially cherishes the time he spends as a big brother for a boy named Andrew.
We spend 4 to 5 hours a week together. He lives with his mom, and he's a big sports fanatic. And spending a couple hours throwing the ball around is good exercise for me. My getting involved in the volunteer side of things has just been very, very fulfilling. We need to get out of this rat race and get a real life.
Not everyone chooses to downshift like Ron did. In the past decade, thousands of Americans were downsized, laid off when the companies they worked for cut labor costs to increase profits. Fred Brown was one of them.
I think if someone were to look at how I was living, they would say, he's really got everything going. Beautiful family, beautiful home, beautiful job.
But the beauty was superficial. Though Fred was earning 6 figures a year as a corporate personnel manager, his life wasn't as wonderful as it appeared.
The so-called good life was coming at, for me, a pretty significant price.
He worked long hours and found little time for his wife and 2 daughters. And his job was stressful. It was his responsibility to tell other employees they'd been laid off. Eventually, his marriage broke up. Then, his own job was downsized.
When I found out I was laid off, it was a shock to me. It's a different experience on the receiving end than on the giving end. The most difficult wasn't the financial letting go. It was the letting go of what I thought was what I was supposed to do with myself.
So at first, he looked unsuccessfully for new opportunities in his field. He could have found them in another part of the country, but he realized he hadn't been happy in his career.
There came a point where I knew I simply had to take the step off the cliff into the unknown.
Fred went back to school and studied massage therapy. His new line of work was far less lucrative than what he'd been used to.
I was faced with going from $100,000 down to $20,000 in income. And the question, obviously, is, well, how are you going to support a lifestyle, a $100,000 lifestyle on $20,000? And the answer is you don't.
So Fred moved to an apartment, sold most of his possessions, and was forced to live on a whole lot less. Ironically, he's still paying off debts he ran up when he was earning 5 times as much.
But I'm not generating debt. I'm not spending more than I'm making. I'm finding I can make the ends meet. I have more opportunity to be present with my family now. And it turns out that for me, living simply seems to be leading to more happiness. wow, what a concept. I am thankful now that I was laid off because I'm doing something that I love. It's what the Buddhists like to call right livelihood. It feels to me like I have found my right livelihood.
Though his home is only a few blocks from a Seattle neighborhood that calls itself the center of the universe, Ming Chen and his family live humbly.
The Lord is good to us. Amen.
Their simple lifestyle is a result of a decision they made years ago when the company Ming worked for transferred him to a job designing weapons he was morally opposed to.
And I said, well, I'm not going to accept the transfer, so you can do with me what you will.
Like Fred Brown, Ming returned to school and changed careers. Now he works at a treatment center for alcohol and drug abusers. He puts in 3 10-hour days each week and is on call for emergencies. Ming's wife, Karen Schneider Chen, doesn't work for pay, but she keeps a busy schedule. Karen volunteers at a shelter for battered women and several other community organizations, including a food bank and the Baby Boutique, a thrift store providing clothes for children from low-income families.
It is important to us that we have time being involved in the community and time for neighbors and helping out older people in our neighborhood. I feel very energized by just about everything I do.
Daddy, the light in the living room is out.
Which light?
With 3 children and only 1 paycheck, Ming and Karen have to be frugal.
Yeah, we live in an old house and there's always work to be done to fix it up and preserve it.
This piano came from my grandparents' house because my mama played it when she was a girl. Now I play it. And then this chair over here, we had to reupholster it. It was a really ugly yellowish brownish color. And I think it came from my mama's grandma. And then the couch, I think that came from my grandparents' house.
Ready?
On one of his days off, Ming and daughter Stephanie run errands. They buy used books, then return them to a local bookstore for credit toward other purchases. When Ming's toaster stopped working, he didn't discard it.
I actually was on the verge of going out and buying a new toaster oven. I had just assumed that anything electrical was going to cost more to repair than it would to buy a new one.
But at a local repair shop, he got the toaster fixed for a fraction of the price of a new one.
That was a choice that resulted in a conservation of resources and supported a small business in our community.
For Ming and his family, saving resources and supporting the community are more important than simply saving money.
A lot of the products that we buy actually don't save money.
For example, they buy organic food, recycled paper, and union-made goods.
It's a process of trying to figure out how to live your life in a way that's consistent with your values. Whenever we face making a decision about how to use our money or our time, we have to take those values into account.
Still, they do find ways to keep expenses down. They buy food in bulk at a local cooperative, reducing both costs and packaging. They cook from scratch instead of using more expensive processed foods. For much of the year, their garden provides fresh produce.
Dinner time.
They raise chickens in their backyard, feeding them kitchen scraps.
It reduces the bulk of our garbage and cuts our garbage bill besides, so we can get away with a micro can. And it generates fertilizer to enrich the soil for our garden without having to rely on chemical fertilizers.
We enjoy chickens because they kind of humanize the city, and people in the neighborhood really enjoy them. They kind of link us more to the community. And we get eggs, beautiful eggs, all different colors.
They also save money by driving as little as possible.
I realize that every gallon of gasoline emits 5.5 pounds of carbon dioxide, which is responsible for global warming. And I think it's really important for us to think of alternatives to the car.
Okay, so the next chapter is called Go to the Raft.
Most evenings, family members gather in the living room to spend time together. For Karen and daughter Susanna, it's often a time to make or repair clothes.
It just feels really important to come together after dinner and have kind of a smooth transition into bedtime. We've done that for so many years. It's part of our rhythm of our family life.
But like all families, this one has its conflicts. Daughter Emily, who is 15, is uncomfortable with her parents' passion for simple living.
I watch more TV, that's for sure. And I avoid the house a lot because it's boring. And I eat more junk food.
It's been difficult, but some of what's going on right now is stuff that any child her age has to go through. All I can do is demonstrate my values, and I can only hope that will have an effect on her and the choices she makes.
We felt like, it really is important that we respect her wishes too.
As he commutes to work by bicycle, Ming Chen often rides through heavy traffic. That's something David Galvin doesn't have to worry about. Galvin found freedom in more ways than one when he, his wife, and 2 children moved from a 2,000 square foot home to an 800 square foot houseboat.
We're trying to live with 4 of us now in the 800 square feet, and it makes it nice and cozy. We had to get rid of a lot of clutter, and we just ended up with the things that were really important to us down here, and that makes a big difference.
On most days, David has a commute that would make anyone envious. He can get to work almost as fast by kayak as by car without consuming energy or creating pollution.
And it's such a great way to get to work because I don't have to deal with traffic, of course. It changes the whole day for me. It gets me more in touch with the environment, which is what I do for my living, too. I work on water quality and hazardous waste and things like that, so it's really important to me to feel that connection. The exercise helps, too. It's a pretty good workout.
What are you learning through the practice of keeping track of your expenses just by writing them down?
It's the little things. And I think I always knew that, but the extent to which that was true was kind of shocking.
A little latte or something every other day, and before you know it, you look at it for a whole year, and that's a couple $100 worth of caffeine just gone down the drain.
At the office, Galvin finds kindred spirits who share his interest in scaling down. Several of them meet regularly at lunchtime for a study group based on a popular guide to frugality called Your Money or Your Life.
I've been struggling with my van. I'm spending $600 a month on that stupid thing to get to and from work.
Can't you use a car that gets great gas mileage that doesn't cost?
I bought it because I wanted to haul a lot of kids around, and we go camping. But I don't haul kids around that much, and we go camping 2 or 3 times a year. I think I can figure something else out.
To follow the program, they must write down every expenditure.
I tend not to spend as much money. I always think, oh, I'm going to have to write this down, and so do I really want to spend it? And I find that really has helped.
Evie McDonald wrote the workbook that David Galvin and his colleagues have been using to simplify their lives. But the work she does today is a far cry from the career she once had in mind.
My goal in life was to become the youngest female hospital administrator in the country.
In 1980, Evie was well on the way to her goal. Promotions and pay raises were coming her way often, and so was a lavish lifestyle.
With each promotion, I was getting a new house, a larger car. I talked about wanting to help people who were less fortunate than myself. But I had 70 pairs of shoes and 100 blouses. I had so much more than I needed.
Then one day, she lost it all. In the morning, a doctor informed her that she had a fatal disease and only months to live.
The day that I was diagnosed with my illness, my home was also robbed, and practically everything was stolen.
Suddenly, both sick and possessionless, Evie McDonald was confronted with questions about the essence of her life.
Who did I want to be when I die? What did I want my life to have been about, to have accomplished? And what I discovered was I didn't want to have the most things. What I wanted my life to be about was understanding love, understanding service, and feeling whole and complete.
Despite her grim prognosis, Evie recovered.
And on my road to health, I saw that I needed to integrate my life. I needed to become a whole person. And part of that was bringing my financial life, how I spent my money, what I did with it, into alignment with my values and my life purpose.
Shortly afterwards, she met a couple whose ideas moved her deeply. Joe Dominguez was a former stockbroker, Vicki Robin, a former actress. Believers in frugality and simple living, they taught others how to get out of debt, save money, and spend their life energy on improving the world.
What I felt was that their work was so important that I wanted to join forces with them.
For over 15 years, Evie has been working with Vicki and Joe, who died in 1997, to promote more frugal and sustainable lifestyles.
The nice thing about voluntary simplicity is that it looks so benign. We look so harmless, you know? Somebody said we're the Trojan horse of change. We'll just sneak right in and they won't notice it. They'll think all those sweet people gathering to talk about simplifying their lives. And then suddenly we will burst out and transform everything.
Ask anyone in Seattle about simple living and they're likely to send you to this woman.
Yes, you're a big help, Maggie.
Cecile Andrews is the author of Circle of Simplicity, the story of the voluntary simplicity study circle movement she started.
I was a community college administrator for a long time, and I was always looking for some sort of class that would lure people out of their homes. And I had tried then a class on voluntary simplicity in 1989, and 4 people signed up, so we had to cancel. And then we did it again 3 years later for a variety of reasons. And that time we got 175. Who's got the egg timer? You want to start?
Cecile organized small groups called study circles instead of lectures. Participants begin with a simple reading list, but much of the discussion is about their own personal experiences.
Dave and I have been making a concerted effort to get more connected in our neighborhood.
There's a sense in study circles that you're there to really change your life. The experience in itself changes you, and the reason it changes people is because people talk about their own stories, why they're here. They have no time, they're working too much, they have no fun, they're not laughing anymore.
We're counting on you to bring your baby to our voluntary simplicity meeting.
Well, I already have.
Group members pledge to make changes in their lives, receiving reinforcement and practical advice from the other participants.
I think the thing I would venture to commit to would be to get to know 3 new neighbors. To at least go say hello and let them know that if they need anything like tools or somebody to watch their house or something, that they can certainly call on us.
Neat.
I think I can stick my neck out that far.
Cecile Andrews believes support groups like this one make it easier for people to change their spending habits.
It's putting positive things in place of the negative things. It's saying the way I kind of fill up this emptiness is not by denying myself something, it's by figuring out what I really need, and I need community, I need creativity, I need some sort of passion in my life, I need connection with nature. And so people help each other figure that out as well.
Oh, wow, look at this. Here's one of the really rare plants of the wetland. Here is the small water parsnip, Variula. It's things like this that really excite me because it instills in you some sense of awe and wonder. And I think the awe and wonder is really the thing that we're missing today.
When Cal DeWitt looks for a little excitement, he goes to the marsh instead of a movie or a mall.
This kind of awe and wonder you carry with you.
He can identify more than 80 birds that live in this wetland by their calls alone. He marvels at the flight of sandhill cranes, the texture of grass, and the work of beavers.
From the break of dawn to noon, on through to the setting sun, and then on into the night, there are absolutely dramatic changes. As you stand for a while, things begin to unfold if you're quiet enough to watch and listen. And after a full day, you're not tired either. You tend to be exhilarated from the experience. But perhaps most curiously of all, you come home with your wallet just as full as when you left. And you've gotten all this pleasure, education, understanding, peace for not a single penny. One also begins to understand something about how the world works. Perhaps the most dramatic thing we learn is how much human society, our current human society, works at cross purposes with the very principles that we learn here in a wetland. We tend to see the world as a one-way flow, from producer to consumer to trash bin to landfill. And here, everything
is recycled. When a stalk of the cattails drops down into the marsh, it's just converted again into soil.
For 11,000 years, since the end of the last ice age, Wabisa Marsh has been working like that. All things in the marsh are part of the cycle of life. Nothing is wasted. Cal DeWitt walked through these wetlands with a certain sense of satisfaction. 25 years ago, this marsh was threatened by development. At the time, Cal was chairman of the tiny township of Dunn, Wisconsin.
We declared a moratorium on all land division in our town for 2 years, and we came up with a stewardship plan.
They stopped unplanned urban growth at the edge of Wabisa Marsh and worked together to restore the already damaged wetland to its natural state. Cal DeWitt is something of an anomaly. A scientist and professor of environmental studies at the University of Wisconsin, he is also a theologian and a deeply religious man.
The scriptural teachings really are kind of turned on their head by our modern consumption philosophy. Consume more, then you will be happy. The scriptural view is honor God, take care of creation, deal your bread to the hungry, and then joy comes as a byproduct of service. We try to short-circuit that in our modern society by pursuing first joy, and of course we miss it.
Our consumer culture teaches us that newer is better. That car, that computer, that outfit you bought, that one you've had for 2 months, it's out of date. You need a new one. One problem with being preoccupied with the new is it keeps us from learning from and appreciating our past. Here at the Orchard, where my husband's roots go back generations, I've been inspired to think about our culture's roots. Many of the first American colonists were seeking to build a society based on the plain living and spiritual devotion they found lacking in their homelands. It wasn't long, though, before traders began to report brisk sales of luxury goods to the colonies. The Puritans passed a series of laws to require simple living. These failed largely because they were applied unfairly. You could wear whatever you wanted if you were rich. The Quakers were somewhat more successful in fending off materialism. They excommunicated slave owners and denounced unfair treatment of Indians and other byproducts of greed. In some ways, the American Revolution itself was a simple living movement. Affluenza was coming to a head in England. The rich spent half the day dressing and gorged on dinners that took 7 hours to eat. The British bled their colonies to pay for this life of luxury, with taxes and laws the colonists found exploitive. The rebellion began with a rejection of English goods. For many American revolutionaries, frugality became synonymous with patriotism. Future President John Adams and his wife Abigail were leaders of the frugality movement.
Frugality, my dear, must be our refuge. I hope the ladies are every day diminishing their ornaments, and the gentlemen too. Let us drink water and eat potatoes, rather than submit to unrighteous domination.
I have neither poverty nor riches, but a heart to be thankful that in such perilous times so large a share of the comforts of life are allotted me.
After years of sacrifice, independence finally came, but with it, the new fondness for materialism. The voices of frugality were drowned out by the sound of money being made. But by the 1840s, those voices were raised again. Inspired by Ralph Waldo Emerson, the Transcendentalists, as they call themselves, believed that a simple life close to nature was the ideal. Utopian communities were formed on this principle over a century before the hippies started theirs. Nathaniel Hawthorne lived at Brook Farm, a utopian community near Harvard. His novel, The Blythedale Romance, is set there. Fruitlands, another transcendental community, was home to a little girl named Louisa May Alcott. Perhaps the best-known transcendental experiment was Henry David Thoreau's solitary retreat to a pond outside Concord, Massachusetts. His book, Walden, still inspires readers today.
Simplicity, simplicity, simplicity.
most of the luxuries and many of the so-called comforts of life are not only not indispensable, but positive hindrances to the elevation of mankind.
One of our most beloved leaders, a man with Quaker roots, tried to promote simple living from the White House, but he found his toughest opponent within its walls.
While her sister women sewed bandages and gave their all to country and to death, the wife of the president seemed to have nothing to do but shop.
But in the decades that followed, it was Mary Lincoln and not her husband whose taste set the tone. Mark Twain summed up the credo of what he dubbed the Gilded Age.
What is the chief end of man? To get rich. What is God, the one and only true? Money is God.
Money ruled until it fell from its throne when the stock market collapsed.
Overnight, the richest country in the world had spawned bread lines, soup kitchens, and apple sellers.
The Depression and war rationing brought American frugality to the surface once more, for a while.
Then, with victory, the lid was off. Fill her up. After we get rid of the ration book, America was back on wheels, and rationing was only a memory.
Americans were spending again, but they had to be trained to conspicuously consume. Industry tackled the job with films devoted to getting us to buy more and more.
Just pick up the plates, the button is pressed.
And the dishwashing unit does all the rest.
The glassware, silverware clean themselves.
Washed and dried, they're back on the shelves.
Hello, I'm Mr. Money.
Not everyone wanted us to catch affluenza. Films like this one tried to teach sensible spending habits.
Gee, Mr. Money, do girls have to learn all this about credit, too?
But the frugality films just weren't quite as exciting.
You're guilty of pouring your money down a rat hole. You forget that it takes 100 pennies to make a dollar.
Henry found out about impulse buying the hard way.
Maybe it's not surprising which genre ended up calling the tune.
This dream house you and I will share was planned for us by Frigidaire.
The dance was on. But the goods life left some people cold.
Little boxes on the hillside, little boxes made of ticky-tacky little...
By the late 1960s, the tune was changing again. The hippies led yet another rebellion against materialism, starting simple living communes across the country. But when the hippie look became just one more product in the marketplace, the counterculture lost its punch.
So hippies don't drop out. Dress up and turn on.
Shirts with European styling.
In the 25 years since the hippies did drop out of sight, materialism has definitely been the prevailing fashion. But now the voices of frugality are being raised again amid the din of consumerism, and their message seems to be reaching a far broader cross-section of Americans. Perhaps this time the impact will be more enduring. But what would happen to our economy if many Americans began to consume less? Would a reduction in spending create an economic crisis?
I don't think that consuming less and saving more would be a bad thing for the economy at all. In fact, I think it would have a beneficial effect on the American economy because the savings would be invested, the investment would add to productivity, and the next generation of people would be better off than they would otherwise be.
We can think about some of the smaller Northern European economies, which have large numbers of what pollsters have called post-materialist citizens, people who are interested in the environment, they're interested in their quality of life and having time. Those are countries which are doing well and have provided a very high quality of life for their citizens.
Take this country, for example.
The Netherlands has the highest level of post-materialists in the population of any country, and I'd venture to say that they have a much higher quality of life on a whole range of things that in the polls, at least, Americans will say are more important to them, such as spending time with their family and friends, having economic security, having meaningful work and a meaningful life.
Nou, Anneke, ons hele leven wordt er zo ongeveer verfilmd, hè?
Heel veel slaan.
Ja, is het te ver?
Dutch interest in quality instead of quantity has brought this couple celebrity status. In Holland, Rob van Eden and Hanneke van Veen are known affectionately as the tightwad couple. Now, that is.
We spent a lot, we bought everything we wanted, and after some years I started to feel empty. I did not like to live like that anymore, so I tried to convince Rob that another lifestyle, more simple, would be better.
In one way, I was already convinced because I was working in an environmental engineering firm and we were making all kinds of scenarios for a clean future of Holland.
In the end, each scenario led to a sobering conclusion. The Dutch environment could only be improved if wasteful overconsumption was sharply reduced.
So I thought, well, you know, I do it for a few months, just to see how low can you go.
They found many ways to reduce their consumption without going low at all. Little changes brought big savings.
When you use tea bags and you switch to a tea egg, from a tea bag to a tea egg, it saves you about $600 in a lifetime.
In time, they cut their spending by 2/3 while finding that the quality of their lives had actually improved. With encouragement from friends, they began publishing a newsletter filled with frugality tips. They were amazed at the response.
One day we couldn't even open our door anymore. There was just a big pile of letters behind it. And all these people saying, yes, yes, finally a paper not about buying, but about not buying, about less instead of more.
Ook een heel bekende situatie waar de banken heel grif op ingaan met creditcards en dergelijke.
Soon they were being asked to speak all around the country.
We talk about the full closets of people, the clutter they have, and everybody can connect to that.
One of their most popular tips is what they call the halving principle. It works for many products. Take shampoo, for example. The next time you wash your hair, try using only half as much as you normally use.
And then when it still works, your hair is clean and you feel comfortable, you use again half of half. And then you go on until it doesn't work anymore. And you think, well, this is not enough. And then you put a little bit extra to it, and then you have the exact amount of shampoo you need. And this is a very good principle, I think.
Recently, Rob and Hanneke translated Your Money or Your Life, the American book about frugality, into Dutch, adapting it to fit their own reality.
The funny thing is we read stories about United States, about tightwads, and they say, sell your second car, you know. And then they say, is this tightwad? Sell your first car. Or give it away, but you don't need a car at all.
But that's easier done in a country like Holland with its separate paths for bicycles and its efficient public transportation.
We are always talking in the Netherlands about the American way of living, but people don't have time to raise their children because they have such a hurry lifestyle.
Peter van Luderveld is the Dutch director of an international organization called the Global Action Plan, or GAP for short. GAP was actually started in the United States, but now finds active participants in many other countries, especially in Holland.
Global Action Plan works through people. It's a real grassrooted organization.
Hoeveel gedeelte van mijn energie die ik in mijn huis gebruik, gaat nou op aan het verwarmen van water?
The basic idea is simple. Friends, neighbors, or co-workers form small groups called eco-teams.
And we are helping them to change their lifestyle towards a more sustainable way of living.
The eco-teams meet monthly and follow a workbook to reduce their household energy and water use, solid waste, and overall consumption of resources.
The eco-team program shows you how to ask the question, do I really need this?
Corinna Van Doren belongs to an eco-team in The Hague.
I first heard about the eco-teams when a friend of mine began to work with GAP, and immediately I thought, hey, that's something for me.
As a result of her participation, she is far more careful about what she buys.
I do this because I want to make a small change, because I hope people will follow my example. In Holland we have a saying, consuminderen. It means to consume less. And that's what I'm trying to do as well. I only want to buy things I really need.
In just 6 years, the number of eco-teams in Holland rose from 40 to 650. A Dutch university study found that members of eco-teams use far fewer resources than their neighbors do and save about $450 a year besides. Clearly, we can learn to consume less wastefully. That's a lesson that's part of the curriculum in one American city.
How much do you guys figure that we spend on our clothing?
This is a very fine Italian tie here. Well, how much are we going to spend on this tie?
$2 for my tie. Two. That's how much I paid for it. $12 for the pants. $19 for the shoes. How much is that? $48. $48. And this is just to show you that you don't necessarily have to spend a lot of money to look professional.
Gerardo Favela frequently shops in thrift stores. He and Nate McKay aren't teachers. They work for the Consumer Credit Counseling Service, bringing a one-of-a-kind program to thousands of students in San Diego area schools.
Our volunteer board of trustees saw a dramatic rise in bankruptcies, a dramatic rise in debt. And they said, when does it stop?
She hopes the bucks will stop here at Castle Park High School, where students are taught to stretch a dollar until it screams. They don't graduate until they've learned to manage money wisely. It's called the Money Masters program.
As we ask students, how many of you own your own credit card? The number of students' hands that go up in the air is rising every semester.
This, despite record levels of credit card debt and a recent study which found that 80% of Americans don't understand basic financial principles. Tanya Orozco is glad her daughter Anita went through the Money Masters program.
She seems to be more aware of how money's managed. She's a lot more understanding about when I don't have money to buy her things or when we can't afford something than she was before.
It really helped me understand a lot more about my mom's finances.
Tanya can't wait until Anita's younger sister Naomi takes it too.
Every commercial she sees, she wants me to buy that item. She'll call me into the living room to look at the TV to show this item that she wants that's being advertised, and it can be really frustrating.
Mommy, can you buy me this movie?
I don't know, honey. Let's see, okay?
It's $1 off.
Okay, we've got to start making less trips to the store.
As a single parent, Tanya knows what it's like to struggle financially. Not long ago, she sought out the advice of consumer credit counselors herself.
A lot of the debt came from me wanting to buy things for my children. I've started learning to say no to certain things.
Each month, Tanya and her daughters go over the family bills together.
I don't want them to grow up and end up with a lot of debt like I'm trying to get out of right now.
What is it?
Money!
It's $1. Okay. $1. Otra vez. $1. The eagle is on the dollar bill.
Consumer credit counselors say even preschoolers aren't too young to learn to save instead of spend.
Esta es una tarjeta de crédito. Parents come back and ask us, what are you teaching my little boy or little girl? Because my little boy or little girl is now telling me that I have to save my money. And they'll ask me, like, is that really something that we need? Yeah, what you do is you get your money and you put it inside the piggy bank. Cuidas tu dinero en tu alcancía.
How many of you have more things than you need in your house? Sometimes I'm invited to speak in classrooms like Gerardo does. And when I do, it gives me a new sense of optimism.
I have clothes that I don't need. I have everything in my closet. I can't get rid of it.
School children often admit to having more than they need, consuming less, sharing more with those less fortunate throughout the world, protecting the earth. Those things just make sense to them. After all, it's their future. There are many ways to simplify, and none of the stories in this program are meant to be a model for everyone. But whether you want to save the environment or simply save money, and whether you take small steps or giant strides, I think you'll find that escaping from affluenza will leave you feeling more fulfilled. It might also leave the world in better shape for generations to come. Thanks for watching. I'm Wanda Urbanska.